You know, it's pretty much everywhere, right? This invisible force that connects our entire world. Wi-Fi. It blankets our homes, our offices, our schools. It's basically as essential as electricity now. But, with this constant invisible presence, there's this nagging question that just won't go away. Is it actually safe?
Look, if you've ever felt just a little bit uneasy about being surrounded by Wi-Fi signals 24/7, you are definitely not alone. We all see the headlines, we hear the stories, and we can't help but wonder. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're cutting through all the noise, we're going to break down the actual science based on a big review of over 100 studies to figure out what's really going on.
So let's just dive right in. Before we can even begin to talk about risk, we have to get a handle on what Wi-Fi radiation actually is. Because it turns out that one word, radiation, well, that's the key to this whole puzzle. All right, Section 1. To solve this puzzle, we really need to understand the difference between the science we know for sure and the science that's, well, still a bit of a mystery.
Okay, so every single wireless device, and that includes your Wi-Fi router, emits this energy that we call radio frequency or RF fields. Now, here is the absolute most important thing you need to know. Not all radiation is created equal, not even close. Think of it like this. On one hand, you've got ionizing radiation, like an X-ray. That's like a bowling ball. It's powerful enough to literally smash into things at a cellular level and damage your DNA. But then you have non-ionizing radiation, and that's Wi-Fi. It's more like a ping pong ball. It just doesn't have the oomph, the energy to cause that kind of direct damage.
So, okay, if it can't damage our cells directly, what can it do? Well, scientists have really looked at two main possibilities. The first one is super simple: heat. It's called a thermal effect. RF energy can warm up tissue, sure, but the amount from Wi-Fi is so tiny that our bodies handle it with no problem at all, just like the heat we generate when we go for a light jog. This is a proven, well-understood effect. No debate here. But the second idea, well, that's what causes all the controversy. It's the theory of non-thermal effects. This is the idea that maybe, just maybe, these RF fields could somehow change our cells without using heat. And honestly, this is where the science gets really murky. As of right now, these so-called mystery effects, they remain totally unproven and unconfirmed by mainstream science.
Okay, so the only established effect is some really minor heating. That brings us to the next big question, right? How much of this energy are we actually getting from our Wi-Fi routers day to day?
When you actually look at where all this RF energy in our environment comes from, the answer might really surprise you. Check out this breakdown. Wi-Fi, it's just a tiny sliver of the pie, only about 10%. The biggest source, by a massive margin, is actually the phone that we carry around in our pockets every single day.
So what's considered a safe level then? Well, the top international group of experts on this, a body called ICNIRP, set a very cautious safety limit. And after looking at decades of research, they landed on this number, 10,000 milliwatts per square meter. I want you to think of that huge number as the official safety ceiling. Don't go above this.
Now, look at this. At a totally normal distance from your router, say about 3 feet away, your actual exposure is just 13 milliwatts per square meter. So let's just put those side by side. The safety limit is 10,000 and a typical router is 13. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second.
And let's be perfectly clear about what this means. Your exposure isn't just a little bit below the safety limit. It's not half, it's not even a quarter of the way there. It is over 750 times lower. And get this, even if you're in a classroom packed with laptops all running at once, the total exposure is still just a tiny fraction of that official safety guideline.
All right, let's move on and see how this all comes together to form the scientific verdict. We know the exposure is super low, but what do the major health organizations have to say about the risk? Especially when you think about some of those really alarming studies you might have seen floating around online.
So, you've probably heard that the World Health Organization classified RF fields as possibly carcinogenic. And I get it, that sounds absolutely terrifying. But we have to ask, what does that classification, Group 2B, actually mean? Well, it's basically a category they use when the evidence is limited and really far from conclusive. To give you some perspective, you know what else is in this exact same category? Pickled vegetables and aloe vera extract. So it's not a confirmation of danger. It's more like a label for things that scientists think need more research.
And this view isn't some kind of outlier. When you look at what the major health agencies all over the world are saying, the message is incredibly consistent.
Australia's top radiation safety agency, for example, puts it perfectly. They state there is, and I'm quoting here, no established scientific evidence that low exposure to Wi-Fi adversely affects health. That, right there, is the global scientific consensus. So, if the consensus is so clear, why do we still see those scary headlines? Good question. It's because not all science is good science. This big review of studies found that many of the alarming reports had some pretty serious flaws. Things like not even measuring the exposure levels correctly, or not having proper controls in the experiment. And on top of that, there's this thing in the science world called publication bias. Basically, a study that finds a scary result is just way more likely to get published and make news than a study that finds nothing at all. And that can really warp our perception of the real risk.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. After looking at the physics, the actual exposure levels, and the overwhelming scientific consensus, what is the bottom line here? Should you be worried?
Here's what all boils down to. Takeaway number 1. The energy from Wi-Fi is the low-energy, non-damaging kind. 2. Your actual exposure to it is incredibly low. We're talking hundreds of times below any official safety limits. 3. The global scientific consensus is clear. There are no confirmed, established health risks from Wi-Fi. And finally, number 4. If you are going to be mindful of any device you own, your focus should probably be on your mobile phone, not your Wi-Fi router.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating final question. We spent decades worrying about this invisible radiation from our tech. But what if the real health effects aren't about radiation at all? What if it's about how we use the technology itself? The constant notifications, the blue light messing with our sleep, the endless scrolling. Maybe the biggest risk isn't the Wi-Fi signal, but what we choose to do with it. Now that is a question worth thinking about.